Hello, my name is Paul Fagan with McCain Institute, and I run our Human Rights and Democracy programs. Today, I'm very pleased to be hosting a very distinguished panel to discuss and explore the impact of the U.S. pullout on Afghanistan, on human rights, and the future of democracy promotion. As you all know, and as our panelists know, our legacy, John McCain was a strong supporter of human rights and democracy around the world. He made many trips to Afghanistan, checking in on the progress made there. So this panel today is as important today as it has been. Today we have Senator Robert Menendez. He's the senior senator for New Jersey and also the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have Ambassador Greta Holtz. She has a long career in the Foreign Service, more than almost 4 decades in the Foreign Service. She's currently the Chancellor of the College of International Security Affairs at the National Defense University. And finally, we have Ambassador Roya Rahmani. She's the last ambassador from Afghanistan to serve here in the United States. And we're so pleased to have her and the voice of Afghanistan here today. Before we get started, I just wanted to pose questions to each of you. I'm going to start with Senator Menendez first, if that's okay. Senator Menendez, as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, you have extensive knowledge on the war in Afghanistan. During a hearing late last year examining the war, you said the United States struggled to enact coherent strategy that would secure Afghan democracy and build strong governing institutions. If the US, its allies, and Afghan partners struggled for 20 years, what can be done now to support Afghans in their struggle against Taliban repression and reversals on progress on human rights and democracy? I think we could start there. I'd love for you to respond to that if you could.
Okay. Well, Paul, thank you for your moderating, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to come speak again at the Sedona program and its forum. And I am glad to be joined by my fellow panelists, Ambassadorrahmani and Ambassador Holtz. Look, I think there is much that can be done. I think that our work in making clear to the Taliban that if they don't observe the reforms that took place in Afghanistan, particularly the advancement of women, the education of girls, the creation of a civil society, that the assistance they seek will simply not flow. I think it's dangerous to have the Taliban try to hold us hostage to the suggestion that unless we give the aid, Afghans will ultimately suffer. I think we have to find ways to the international community, the United Nations, others and allies who have some working relationship with the Taliban to help everyday Afghans in meeting the struggles they have under the Taliban, particularly in terms of nutrition and healthcare. And then I think it's a question of whether the international community creates high standards for the Taliban and sticks to it in the expectations of what we want to see from them if they are to gain any form of recognition whatsoever.
Senator Menendez, thank you for that. You brought up an important point. You touched upon, the rights of women and girls, and I'd like to bring in Ambassador Rahmani here as the former ambassador here to the United States, but also you were an NGO leader, you were a government leader in Afghanistan. You've written extensively on the plight of women and girls, during the past 20 years, but also now under return to Taliban rule. You recently wrote an article with Ambassador Milan Vivir at Georgetown University. She was the fourth, of course, former ambassador at large for women's rights in the Obama administration. I'd love to get your take on, where you see, women's and girls' rights going, human rights in general in Afghanistan, and just your opening thoughts on this issue.
Thank you very much. I would also like to join Senator Menendez and thank the Sedona Forum for organizing this event, and thank you for moderating. It's an honor to participate in this panel alongside Senator Menendez and Ambassador Holtz. When we are talking about human rights, we need to recognize that Taliban are a group that not only do not believe in human rights, but they also politically reject it. They reject it because they say it's a foreign construct, it's a Western construct, and whether they believe it because they have been trained to, or they adapt it for convenience because it has been a factor that allowed them to recruit fighters for so long by promoting certain ideologies, including this one. So when we are talking about what we could do to get them to cooperate, I wouldn't necessarily expect Taliban to be agreeing with the term human rights. We need to sort of break it down in different elements and apply different strategies. But in terms of what can be done, what are some of those potential leverages, I would like to add to what Senator Menendez was talking about here, is that the humanitarian assistance, which is really key, but and we know that whether we like it or not, the Taliban government would benefit by the flow of the humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan. However, they wouldn't necessarily care also if we cease that altogether. So another way, they also are cognizant or realize that if people of Afghanistan stay hungry, they justify that it is the America who left and the former administration who left them in this chaos, and it is their fault that people are suffering, and they know that hungry people do not have the energy to protest. But the way to handle this, I would say, is to bring some sort of sanction, to use the leverages that we have in a way that would impact them and affect them, like probably put ban on their own travels home, ban on their children studying abroad in the regional countries, maybe sanction their own assets. That would be something probably that would draw their attention when we are trying to find some leverages. Secondly, I would also say that empowering Afghan people by helping them and investing in infrastructure. That would be another way to help the situation. And thirdly, defining what we exactly want and how we are going to go about it. There is a number of different ways that we can certainly utilize better to help with this very dire situation.
Thank you, Ambassador Rahmani. Ambassador Holtz, I want to go back a little bit. We'll certainly talk about human rights and democracy in Afghanistan and what we can do. But you just held a very senior and prominent role during the evacuation of Afghanistan. You were based in Qatar. You were you oversaw the senior U.S. coordinator for Operation Allies Refuge in Qatar from October 2021. I'd love to get your thoughts. I mean, you saw thousands of Afghans come to Qatar. You oversaw it. You saw the human side to all of this, not just the numbers. I'd love to get your thoughts on what you saw and what you see going forward as far as what we can do in Afghanistan, especially in this area of human rights and democracy.
Thank you very much. And I join my colleagues in thanking you for hosting us. I'm very honored to be on the screen with the Senator and with Ambassador Rahmani. So the thing that gave me a lot of heart in that evacuation, which was very difficult, August, 128 degrees in Qatar, no warning really of what was to come out of Kabul, that we had American soldiers, airmen of all ilk, private citizens, NGOs, Qataris, and a host of international organizations, and the entire U.S. interagency sent teams there. We may not agree politically on everything. I'm sure there were lots of disagreements, but we pulled together. We did not focus on any differences. We helped the human being in front of us. So we saw a lot of suffering. We had grandmothers tied to wheelchairs with broken legs. We had unaccompanied minors, orphans, street kids. We had bullets. People handed us the bullet that had come out of their head. And so the heartening thing to me was whether or not, the evacuation was not well planned, but we took care of the people in front of us. And we did not let anyone suffer while they were in Qatar, and then we moved them on. So to me, that was that effort was the symbol of what America stands for when we say, give us, you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor. We did that. It was not easy and it was not perfect, but it was heartening. Going forward, I think that, as you know, the Taliban are not united. There are a range of Taliban. There are some moderate-ish ones, and there are some very hardline extreme ones. So building leverage to get the Taliban to do things is challenging because they are not of one mind or one voice. I believe that some of the neighboring countries, some of the Gulf countries, the Europeans, and we have opportunities to work with the Taliban, who are the more moderate ones, on things they want. They want recognition. That's a carrot we have. They want a functioning airport. They need an international airport. The Qataris gave them that, enabled them to have that. They need it. They want it. The Qataris have some leverage. The neighboring countries in Central Asia have leverage in trade routes, in border issues. So I think to work leverage as a team with some of the other partners that we have, the new Pakistani government has indicated a desire to work with us on the Taliban and getting them to be more moderate. Whether or not you believe them is a different story, but they have leverage, perhaps more than we do.
Thank you, Ambassador Holtz. You raised a good word is leverage. And in this world, I want to turn it over to Senator Menendez with this issue of leverage for Afghanistan, where the United States no longer has a presence. We certainly had this leverage for many, many years. I don't want to necessarily bring Ukraine into this conversation, but you can't ignore sort of the global issues going around us. But also, as we talk about Afghanistan, where are our leverage points where we can continue to leverage our connections, as Ambassador Holtz just talked about, whether it's the Pakistanis, the Qataris, others, to help secure more humanitarian aid to Afghanistan, to those who are in dire need?
Well, it is going to be those countries. The Qataris certainly play a significant role. We'll see there is a new Pakistani government coming into power in Pakistan. And then, there is the needs that Ambassador Holtz talked about as it relates to the Taliban themselves and whether they respond in any traditional way to a resolution of those needs in return for acting in certain ways. But look, I am very cautious about the Taliban. I just believe that what we've seen, a report of Taliban executions of former government officials, of street thugs beating female protesters, of 12-year-old girls prevented from attending school. You look at the Taliban's utter failure to protect the Afghan Hazara Shia community, who have been the target of several deadly bombings over the past week, including against a mosque and a school. And certainly my condolences go out to the community for the lives lost. So you look at the Taliban as they are, as I said to Secretary Blinken a while back when the administration made this decision, I don't think there's such a thing as a reformed Taliban at the end of the day. The ambassador did make the point that there are differences within their organization, but the question is, who has the ability, the command and control at the end of the day to execute in a way along the lines of what we'd asked them to do, whether that's through the Qataris, whether that may be through a Pakistani government, or also, while we have conflict in terms of competition with the Chinese, they no longer have a free rider situation going on as it relates to Afghanistan. So there are many different points of contact, but for me, it's not so much are there points of leverage. I believe we can generate points of leverage. We can use assistance, economic assistance, but in a way that ultimately gets the Taliban to act in accordance with our expectations. We can get other countries for which we have direct leverage with to use their leverage with the Taliban. But the question is the Taliban truly going to respond to that? Are they going to act as, let's say, quote unquote, traditional actors would act? And I just, the jury is out on that for me.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. I think that's a good segue to Ambassador Rahmani. I mean, you're from Afghanistan. You've lived in Afghanistan. You've been a refugee. You were a refugee as a result of the Taliban. And I think Senator Menendez said something very poignant, saying there's no such thing as a reformed Taliban. So as you see from your career as a diplomat, I don't even want to ask, I mean, you see the Taliban, but where are those leverage points to work on the issues that you still care deeply about? But also you mentioned infrastructure. What can be done to build a new infrastructure, continue infrastructure in Afghanistan if you don't have a reformed Taliban?
Thank you. I would like to pick up on the point that Senator raised in terms of Taliban being a traditional interlocutors or not. And certainly from everything that I know, they are not. This is why they are presenting themselves to be so unpredictable. They do not care necessarily about the same things that the rest of the world would expect a normal government to care about. They do not act as such. They do not necessarily care about the well-being of the people. In fact, one of the issues that you mentioned before about the women's rights and like the girls' education, there is nothing that shows that it's either it has a religious basis, their argument, or it is on the basis of the cultural or traditional practice of the Afghan people. It is their interpretation. They use it for the cohesion that Ambassador Holtz was talking about, because there are different groups and they want to make sure that some of their fighters do not go out and say that you told us something different for the past 20 years or especially past 10 years to fight for, and now you are going to turn and to be the same people as the previous government. So what did we fight for? This is something that we specifically are hearing from them. So as a result of that, they are presenting themselves to be this group of people that they are just doing everything at their own will, given that they have some degree of control all over the country, and they are like sort of one group at this point. And now it's difficult to deal with them because they are not traditional interlocutors, simply. What would be some of those leverages and my point about infrastructure? So one of the very important leverages the countries in the region, because their assets sit in the region. This is something that has personal impact on them. Their ability to travel and talk to the regional actors, because this is what they care about. They, as Ambassador Holtz said, that they care about recognition, the ability to talk to the counterparts outside the region and to have meetings. So all of this comprehensively could be woven so that there is the give and take, but in a way that does not tell them that they can wait us out once again, because they have learned this very well. They think that they can always wait everybody else out because they are there and the rest will run out of patience. So with that, when I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about infrastructure that would empower people. Instead of handouts and charity baskets, wills, irrigation systems, programs, bridges, whatever we could possibly do to enable people that they could themselves be empowered enough to oppose this. And the region has a big stake in that. The regional countries, from an ideological perspective, and instead of simply saying we are encouraging Taliban to allow their girls to go to school, they could say it is un-Islamic. They could come together and say that we are denouncing this because this is totally an Islamic practice. And this is not going to have necessarily a negative impact politically for them. At the same time, they themselves could do this for their own national security interests, because to do the math, we will have literally 16 million men under the age of 30, hungry and uneducated growing in Afghanistan. So these are some of those leverages that hopefully through some of the better planning, we would be able to address. In addition to that, especially for girls, I would say access to internet, to the devices that has long-lasting batteries is absolutely essential, because that is the only thing they have left, connectivity.
That's an excellent point, right? I mean, that's one thing that is very different from the 90s to now is connectivity. Afghans have access to the world now, more so than they did in the 90s. And, you know, obviously they have connections, and thousands, if not millions of Afghan, you know, whether they're refugees or diaspora or around the world. I mean, that's an excellent point. I want to ask Ambassador Holtz, you know, you have a long experience in the region, Middle East, South Asia. You were the head of, you know, the reconstruction, the provincial reconstructions in Iraq. You have a lot of experience in the area of reconstruction and development and whatnot. You know, from your perspective, where do you think, you know, Afghanistan is headed under, whether it is under a Taliban rule, a limited Taliban rule? And I want to get back to this point of leverage. I think you brought it into this question. Where does Iran fit? Where does Qatar and Pakistan? And also, we have this big question about China coming in and usurping, you know, the U.S. presence there. Sorry, I kind of added a lot of different things there, but love to get your perspective.
Thank you. So I think one thing that all of the countries in the region, and I mean broader region, including China, including Iran, the Gulf, the Central Asian neighbors, stability is important to all of them. They want a stable country so that they can either sell things or get things done. They don't want refugees pouring across their borders. I think it was very significant that during the winter, when people were close to starvation or some were actually starving, that we did not see the huge refugee outflows that we expected, because the US and our European allies came in with food and humanitarian assistance. I do not think that things are trending well in Afghanistan from all reports. The Taliban are not getting better. As Ambassadorrahmani mentioned, the more moderate Taliban leaders are fearful, and what they don't want is their more radical or less moderate members joining ISIS Khorasan. That's their, you know, sworn enemy. So that they have to, the Taliban themselves have to balance between what we want from them, what they may want as, and I use air quotes, moderate leaders, and what their more radical members want. So I think from what I understand now, there is no civil society activity overtly in Afghanistan. I think one of the things we can do is to, and everybody has their connections still to this day to their civil society partners. If they have accounts outside of Afghanistan, just keep funding them so that when and if things get better, they can operate again. As Ambassadorrahmani said, really all we can do right now for the type of civil society work, human rights work is external. So I'm not sure if that fully answered, but you know, the Taliban are 100% transactional. So to be able to use leverage, you have to have something they want. And I think the senator mentioned a couple of things that they seem to want. So we need to figure out the behavior we want to change in order to be able to trade what they want, if we can.
Thank you. Senator Menendez, you're the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. You are a champion of human rights and democracy around the world. Many of us, you know, look to you for your words on whether it's Cuba, Venezuela, Russia, you know, around the world. You're a huge supporter of the National Endowment for Democracy and many other democracy promotion organizations. And I just wanted to kind of get back to the topic of this conversation, but also our theme of the Sedona Forum today is this strategic competition. You know, so how can we continue to support human rights and democracy in Afghanistan when it's so difficult to, one, penetrate, you know, Afghanistan? And where does this issue of strategic competition come in with China, you know, and is Russia even a factor in a place like Afghanistan anymore?
Well, look, I think that, first of all, leaving Afghanistan means that we are no longer bound to a duplicitous Pakistani government that gave safe haven to the Taliban. I believe that we should recalibrate our relationship to take into account the bigger picture, which is Pakistan's close economic ties with China, its role in nuclear proliferation, its repression of religious minorities at home. Now, I want to give the opportunity to the new prime minister to see if some of what he has said is what he actually will do, in which case there can be a new chapter in that relationship. But they're going to continue to have an influence if they want to ultimately show us that they are truly, under this new government, truly committed to a different course. They could use that influence to pursue a different course. The Qataris, who have been a great ally to the United States most recently, not only the access that they gave to Afghan refugees and the interlocutorship that they have provided and our base there and so much more, they have a significant role to play. And one of the things that we would want to see them is to advocate for the promotion of the basic human rights that we made strides for women, for girls in education, for civil society in general. Now, the Taliban wants recognition. That's a big thing. I don't think it should be given. The Taliban wants to see the elimination of certain sanctions. That's a significant thing. I don't think they should be given until and if we see them act in ways that meet our concerns for human rights, for the rights of Afghan women and girls and others in civil society. So our actions must be, yes, about security as well. And certainly I have still not seen them ultimately renounce some of the terrorist entities they said they would. But yes, it must be about a security dimension, but it must also be to try to be able to preserve those parts of human rights that we were able to promote during the 20 plus years that the United States was there with our allies.
And I want to pick up on that with Ambassadorrahmani. Where do you think, what isn't being subjected by the Taliban right now? Where were those rights that were earned, hard earned by Afghans themselves for the past 20 years? Where do you see those continuing? I mean, as you indicated, Afghanistan is more connected than it was 20 years ago. What progress continues, or is there, or has it all just come to an end?
Well, I'm hoping, and that really gets many of us going, that we will continue to see the fruits of the investments that was made in the past 20 years, simply because the educated can never be uneducated again. And there is a huge population back there that still very much strive for different values. It's a different Afghanistan that Taliban has come to, and the results of that is that you see that Taliban, for example, have or allowing girls to go to school, like in the elementary school, girls are going to school. Universities are open also for girls, though they are changing policies continuously, and they shift the times and the days in which girls could go to school and in which boys could go to universities. And now they are hung up, and they cannot resolve what happens to the secondary and high school girls. Though it's a no-brainer, it shouldn't even have been a problem. What I'm trying to say is that it is that pressure. It is that change that has found roots in Afghanistan that has forced Taliban to change. Taliban or not, change Taliban. I am in no doubt that they are the very same people that they were before. But the fact that we see that they are acting differently, and they are not executing people left, right, and center on the street saying they opposed us, is a result of those changes. In addition to that, there has been many changes that really got root and changed the mindsets, the paradigm, the fact that Afghan people are now really wanting anything and want nothing more than for their children to be educated, for their children to go to school. This was not the case before. So a lot of these are still there. That's certainly an opportunity, but where is the risk is that if we let all of that die, that if we continue to leave Afghanistan to become completely isolated, being under this tyrant regime, and then hoping that the regional countries do their share, which obviously I do not see them doing it so far. Yes, some countries have tried, but it not nearly enough. But if we drop the ball, then not only it is injustice and a problem for the people of Afghanistan, but also a security, an economic, and a social problem for the rest of us, because the world today, again, is connected. Nothing stays in the borders because there are borders.
I want to pick up on a comment that you made about not dropping the ball. And Ambassador Holtz, you've been in Iraq, you've been in Afghanistan, you've served in the region. Broadly, you know the region very well. The United States has placed a lot of resources in this area. How do we not drop the ball?
I mean, I think we have to pay attention to what's going on in Afghanistan, to keep our goals clear, to understand the goals of the Taliban, the moderate ones, and the constraints on their behavior vis-a-vis the non-moderate ones. We have very, very top-line security goals within Afghanistan. No Al-Qaeda, no ISIS-K. These originally were our top goals for going into the country to begin with. So I think as long as our government continues to work with our European partners, some of the regional partners, and not forget that what brought us to Afghanistan in the beginning, which was a counterterrorism mission, which grew and grew and grew. This happened in almost the same in Iraq. So I think we have to don't forget Afghanistan, because the problems that brought us there, they're simmering. They could become a major hub for terrorism again. And I think that alone, in addition to, of course, the humanitarian and all the strides we made and all the blood and treasure that our country and other countries, our allies, and the Afghans themselves spent there, make it imperative on us to not forget and to not let it go completely back into a bad place.
And Senator Menendez, similarly, how do we keep our eye on the ball in Afghanistan? I mean, you have constituents who probably served in Afghanistan, and as Americans, we have been witnessing what's been going on in Afghanistan for 20 plus years. And it's important probably to many of your constituents and more globally even. So how do we keep our eye on the ball in light of all of the global issues going on? Iraq, obviously other issues happening in Africa, Latin America, and other places. How do we keep our eye on our ball and not forget about Afghanistan?
Well, look, it will require the continuing efforts by those who have interests in the country and in the region, in addition to those who gave lives and our country that gave so much national treasure over the course of 2 decades. One of the ways that we're going to keep our eyes, I'm glad that Congress, passed the Afghanistan War Commission in last year's defense budget, which will address the entire U.S. mission in Afghanistan, not just the military dimension, but also efforts to fight corruption, build institutions, and spur sustainable development. In my role as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, I appointed Laura Miller to this commission, and I think she has a deep knowledge of the issues in history. So I look forward to having the commission focus in a context of what are lessons learned, because I think over the course of years, there are many lessons to be learned. I started a series of hearings at the Foreign Relations Committee to look at just that. But while that may be seen as retrospective, the reality is that looking at what we did well, what we did not so well, what lessons were learned, what our government told us over different administrations, both Democrat and Republican, over the course of 20 years, versus what we actually realize are lessons that can be taken to place now as we deal with Afghanistan under the Taliban. And so, I think all of those elements are going to keep a focus on Afghanistan. Our regional partners in the region are going to certainly make sure that our attention is focused on Afghanistan. And our own vital interests drive the necessity to be focused on Afghanistan, both in terms of the security issues that, as the ambassador said, we want to see preserved so that we do not have a return of Afghanistan to the place where we could have attacks generated from against the United States, but also in terms of preserving, what was the blood and treasure of 2 decades of commitment to Afghanistan that I think those who fought there, those who served there, those who have family there want to see ultimately preserved, and they will drive that as well.
I know we are running out of time now, and I want to give each of you a few minutes just for some closing remarks, and then just want to pose, sort of closing questions. But, first, Ambassador Rahmani, you have a global audience here. You're probably reaching thousands of people right now, and this is a very personal issue for you, I can imagine. What's the message that you want to deliver to Americans and around the world about Afghanistan? We have worked with other Afghan men and women who are very saddened and hurt and worried about their country. So what's your message, and what can the rest of us do to support you and your fellow countrymen in this time?
Thank you. My message is that I know it's hard. I know it has been difficult. I know we have been disappointed, extremely disappointed, in fact. Afghans more than others, probably. But let's not treat it as a hopeless cause, because in that, we are going to be the one who will be at loss. It's still a country, there's almost 40 million people living, and they want nothing but a normal life like every other human being on the face of earth. They want employment, they want education, and a lot of the conceptions or misconceptions that exist about and around them are not necessarily true. It's not a traditional practice for the Afghans not to want their girls to go to school or just to marry them off or sell them off or whatnot. These are the most dire situation and even unseen in our history. So number one, let's not lose hope, because we will be losing along the way. Second, let's find creative ways and start thinking out of the box. Practically, I would suggest let's involve tech companies. They have a lot of reach around the world. They have a huge role and they can play an important role. Involve Afghans. There are thousands, tens of thousands of them, in fact, around the world, who know the country, who you have trained and been your partners in the past 20 years and are aching for their country. They want to contribute. Involve them, bring them on board the tech companies, bring interagency groups and members, and let's devise something, not necessarily in terms of being more, but being less, but effective. It's not always necessarily that the more that matters, it is how effective things are. And I would say we are still hopeful. You have invested in human capital along many other things, and that is what would make us hopeful. And this episode will change, because I, in my life, have already seen 5 different regimes in my country, and I am hopeful this will also go, and we will find a way out.
I really appreciate your comments, and positive and hopeful comments at that. I know it's very difficult for Afghans today to kind of witness what's going on. And then, Ambassador Holtz, again, Ambassador Rahmani left us with some positive words. I think many of us, when we think of Afghanistan, it's hard to think about that. You welcomed all of those Afghans to Qatar during that period, as we mentioned earlier. You've served in Iraq. Where do we go from here? How do we keep the hope going? And how do we support our Afghan partners continuously?
Thank you. Really good question. I second what Ambassador Rahmani said. We do have to exhibit leadership and remain optimistic. When you engage with Afghans now, you can only engage with them outside of Afghanistan. They are committed, they are brilliant, they are heartbroken, they're everything that we would be if this happened to our country. So as the senator said, and I think our congressmen have a great role to play, keep the light on, have some of the, hold hearings, have testimony. Our media does a pretty good job of every once in a while putting a story out about Afghanistan. Right now they're pretty dire and bleak, but maybe, have some positive stories. I think the diaspora is a powerful potential tool in keeping the story alive, keeping positive energy going, and enabling education to continue outside of Afghanistan if we cannot fully do it inside Afghanistan.
Thanks so much for that. And Senator Menendez, I want to give you the last word, but I want to kind of put you on the spot and ask you, what do you think John McCain would do? What would he say? I mean, you knew him well, you served with him. You knew him for decades.
Well, I think that John would say we cannot give up on the Afghans after so many of America's lives and national treasure has been invested in it. And not only because of that reason, but because what Afghans deserve themselves in terms of their aspirations. And look, I think on a positive note, I think John would have loved my visit to the base in New Jersey that housed thousands of Afghan refugees. During the course of my visit at the base, I saw the beginning of communities who brought some of their traditions with them in terms of family structure as they tried to create new communities in temporary haven as they were ultimately being helped to find a new place to call home. And I think Ambassador Rahmani is very right. They are a powerful force at the end of the day. But the story that I think really John would have loved is this one. While I was touring the base, there was a special commander who was both a U.S. citizen, obviously a U.S. officer, but also a Afghan. And he had a special label, and it showed the U.S. flag and the Afghan flag on it. And this young boy came over and said, "That's the Afghan flag." And he says, "That's right." And the young boy then said, "And that's the American flag." And he said, "That's right." And the young boy said, "I'm an American." Well, that reality is what John McCain would have been all about. That at the end of the day, creating that opportunity so that it's not about being an American, but it is about the values that America has, the goals, ideals that it stands up for, and that we were helping the Afghan people realize for themselves through their own leadership, but creating that opportunity that he would say we have to preserve.
No, I think we'll end right there, Senator Menendez. I think you summarized it in using John McCain's words and actions, but thank you so much for that story. I think that certainly summarizes some of the things that we were trying to get at. I want to thank our panelists, Senator Menendez, Ambassador Rahmani and Ambassador Holtz for joining us today. Thank you for tuning into the Sedona Forum. We're so happy to do this in a virtual way and include everyone that we can. These are really important topics today, and we've had a great panel here. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.